I'm Trevor Littledale, and I played Tim in the new series of the last 4 years' worth of Tomorrow People. I was called myself a jobbing actor, which means I do voiceover. I'll do anything. I do stage, television, theatre. So, if somebody, rings up and offers me money, I tend to do it. I quite often do it without money, in fact. I came in on it. I had worked for the company called Big Finish Productions for a number of years in other sorts of science fiction. I did Judge Dredd and a couple of Doctor Who sort of spin-offs. Okay. Bernice Summerfield was the first one I ever did. And one of the directors at Big Finish Productions decided that I sounded a little bit like the late Philip Gilbert, who had played Tim in the original series of Tomorrow People and sadly had died. So I think that the Tomorrow People sort of went into abeyance for a bit. They didn't do it. And they finally brought Tim back in the person of me. So I was playing Tim. Because, as I say, I sounded a little bit, apparently I sounded a little bit like him. And I remember them saying, shall we send you some of the discs so you can hear him? And I said, yes. But for some reason that didn't happen, and I was quite glad it didn't, because as an actor I tend to mimic. I think a lot of actors do. They tend to hear a voice and then latch onto it. So I was quite glad I didn't, because I think I'd have found myself, following or mimicking Philip, which I didn't want to do, especially as apparently I sounded a little like him anyway. So I just played him, as I read the script and I knew a little bit about him, so I played him as I thought. And to my eternal delight, I was sort of accepted by the other cast members who sort of welcomed me on board rather as a family. And I must just tell you this little story because it's quite delightful. When they brought Tim back, there's a scene where Helen Goldwyn as Eleanor says, "Oh, it will be nice to have Tim back with us," because Tim had been damaged in a laboratory explosion, so he wasn't in a couple of episodes because he'd had this. So Nicholas Young, who played John, says, he may not sound quite the same. He was quite badly damaged in this explosion. So when I came on, finally, there's a lot of sort of, the special effects, and a lot of sort of tweeting and chirruping and special effects sounds. And then finally I say my first line. I can't remember what it was, but I said my first line was Tim. But there was this lovely, because I wouldn't sound exactly like the other fellow, there was this lovely excuse, if this excuse needed, for Tim sounding a little bit different, that he'd been blown up, reassembled by John. And it became a delight every time the phone rang, and it was either the writers said, "We've got a new Tomorrow People," and I knew it was like going back to the studios. It was like going and joining a family. I think they were new stories with the same people, and a lot of the same cast who'd been on the television series, but they were writing new stories, so that the Tomorrow People were having new adventures. So I don't think there was there were historical references to things that would have been, to the people who followed it from its birth, they would have been things that people would have seen and would relate to who'd watched it originally. But the series certainly that I was involved with were new stories, new storylines. I think it was like a lot of science fiction. It had a wonderful way of always triumphing, the good always triumphing over evil. So there was always that, which you might say, well, that's a recurring theme, and it might be a recurring theme in something like the old horror films. Dracula was always the good over evil. I think it captured people's imagination, that whole idea of jaunting, and that alone was a lovely idea, a lovely word to think of, to jaunt, because you just jaunt somewhere. And that they put this belt on and just sort of float through time and space. And then the telepathic communication, and I think we've all at some point loved the idea of just being able to go somewhere without catching a bus or going on the underground. So just you jaunt, and suddenly you're there, and then you're just somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I think that was a kind of timeless appeal. And the fact that there was this group of people who, they would have their odd disparities, but they were basically friends and got on well. And